Hey everyone, it's HERESY, top 50 NA player and coach, and almost rank 1 Victor. This video is going to cover lane phase, common mistakes Victor players make, character-specific micro, how to play fights, and a detailed build guide. This guide is going to assume you're already familiar with the absolute basics of Victor, such as what his abilities actually do. This video is going to use consistent gameplay clips that illustrate the points I'm making verbally. If you get lost, please refer to the timestamps in the description. Beginning with the lane phase. Unlike Victor's late game, which is relatively simple in how he plays team fights and uses his skills, his lane phase is actually deceptively complicated, and this is the number one thing that holds Victor players back in lower elos. His entire lane phase hinges on his efficient usage of his first skill, Pain Battery. It's unusual because the skill does not have a standard time-based cooldown, but rather is entirely based around Victor taking, by default, 40% of his maximum health in damage. What this effectively means is the more damage Victor is able to heal over the course of the lane, the more damage he's actually able to do. This is especially important when you consider two things. One, the reworked healing minions now heal you for a percentage of your missing health, which means the lower your health is on Victor, the more you get healed. It's also similar to how Jumpstart works, in that Jumpstart damages you for a percentage of your current HP, which means the lower HP Victor is, the more he effectively heals from Jumpstart, since he damages himself less and less when casting it. Because of these two mechanics, Victor is technically the strongest, i.e. the most able to output damage and effectively trade with his opponents, when he is relatively low on HP. Now you don't just want to avoid dying on Victor, but also being too low on HP can mean you can be bullied out of being able to properly trade or interact with your enemies. If you're 200 health, though you might be healing more effectively, you're too low to actually fight anyone, and that's bad. But Victor doesn't want to be full HP. The more health he has, the less health he heals, and the less health he heals, the less damage he can actually do. This character is best when he's walking the line between being just high enough HP, he can't be bullied, but low enough HP that he's healing effectively. An example of this is the clip you see here. My Pain Battery is charged, and my Jumpstart is about to come off of cooldown. And even though I'm half HP, I do not use my Jumpstart for healing immediately, because I'm intending to fight the enemies on this wave. And so I look to use my Pain Battery first, before I cast my Jumpstart. Also notice how when I kill the Yamato, I realize I can upgrade my Jumpstart, and do so before I cast it. This gets me 50 extra health, which matters. It is important to note, however, I don't mean to say you should always only use Jumpstart when you've already used your Pain Battery. In an instance like this, where I have 250 health against a Grey Talon who can burst me down with his arrow, it's safer that I use Jumpstart purely for the healing now, because if I were to go in to use Pain Battery in a trade, I might just die immediately. Something else to consider is the second half of Victor's kit, that being his Aura of Suffering and his high damage gun. At the beginning of the game, Victor actually has one of the highest DPS weapons in the game. What this means is Victor is actually particularly well equipped to punish enemies that have overextended or used their core abilities, because he always has his high damage gun online and always is able to toggle on his Aura of Suffering for extra damage. Though this ability hurts Victor, it damages Victor less than it hurts the enemy. And again, as we've covered, Victor taking damage is actually especially effective because it charges his first skill, Pain Battery. To put it simply, all else being equal, if everyone in a fight has used all of their abilities, then Victor is the strongest person in the fight, because he always has his third ability, Aura of Suffering, and he always has his very effective gun. One of Victor's strengths in the lane phase is his ability to tower dive. This is partly because the more damage he takes, the more offensive abilities he has, because he charges his Pain Battery. There are many instances in the lane phase where Victor can use a Pain Battery, then aggressively dive the tower, expecting to take enough damage that he'll be able to quickly cast another skill within the next few seconds. Most characters in the game, especially during lane phase, don't have access to a very high damage skill with a 3 or 4 second long cooldown. Victor does, but only specifically when he takes lots of damage. Play to this strength. This synergizes very nicely with Victor's ultimate, which gives him an extra layer of security to use his HP as an offensive resource to charge his pain battery. In the following clip, you're going to see me tower dive Pocket and McGinnis. We do this because we know we have the ult advantage. Both of us have our ults, and both of the enemies do not. Because of this, I can use the extra health granted by my ultimate to charge my pain batteries faster than I'd otherwise be able to do without risking my life. This sequence really illustrates the unique minigame Victor is always playing around his jumpstart, pain battery, and health bar. There is a sense in which his pain battery really truly has no cooldown, and that offensive capability that Victor can employ situationally is too much for many characters to handle in Deadlock, especially in the laning phase. Mastering this is mastering Victor. You must also play to the strength of your Powerspikes. With the new 4.8k breakpoints, Victor gains a lot for playing for the 4.8k Spirit Spike investment. This is an enormous power spike for Victor, and since you will likely be saving your souls to buy Torment Pulse during the 5-6 minute mark, acknowledge that you are likely weaker than your opponents. But also, when you do buy your Torment Pulse and get your spike, play very aggressively. You are likely stronger than your opponents during this window. Notice here how I preferentially throw all of my pain batteries on the Pocket instead of the McGinnis. I do this because Pocket actually has a weakness to spirit damage, and so all of Victor's abilities do more damage to Pocket. This is actually especially important because Pocket is one of Victor's hardest counters. Something to consider is whenever you see a Pocket on the enemy team, try lane swapping into his lane. I think Victor has a very favorable matchup into Pocket because of his high spirit damage and his ability to so effortlessly target the damage onto the Pocket. If you can shut Pocket down in laning phase, your endgame will be much smoother. Now let's move on to some more general concepts that apply to Victor. Whereas in the last clip, a large portion of my strength came from my power spike from having spent all my souls on Torment Pulse, you're about to see me do the opposite in this clip, where I'm caught out and am forced to rotate to an important fight without having spent my money. This results in me being much, much weaker than I should have been, and I think makes the difference between the fight being a win and a loss. While I don't think I had the time to stop by the secret shop while this fight was occurring, the real mistake was lingering in yellow at the walker when I had no real ability to actually push it, instead of taking the time to go spend my souls in case a fight were to happen elsewhere. The more damage Victor does, the more he heals. The more he heals, the longer he lives so that he can cycle back to another pain battery or another jumpstart. This means just very small increases in Victor's damage gives him much more survivability. It's always important on Victor to be cognizant of fights happening around the map. Don't be pushing a lane or killing a jungle camp with a sizable amount of souls in your pocket when something is potentially about to happen. Victor is not an AFK farmer. He is much more of a skirmisher. He has extraordinarily high health regen when you go Spirit Victor because of having so many jump starts. Because of this, Victor actually really excels at invading enemy jungle and taking lots of fights. If Victor engages someone in the side lane or in the enemy jungle, and both players damage each other to half HP, Victor is going to heal that back very quickly, whereas perhaps the enemy won't. This means oftentimes Victor can create situations in which enemies are low HP and not able to consistently repel him from invading their jungle. Victor should generally not be AFK farming his own jungle. He should be, as much as possible, particularly when he has the safety of his ult, inside of the enemy jungle, taking it from them. Whenever you can get away with it, invading enemy jungle is almost always better than taking your own jungle. However, you can't always do that. Maybe you don't have your ultimate, so it's riskier. You don't have your jumpstart max, so you can't cleanse CC so you can run away. Or maybe you haven't spent all your souls. Well, in that case, absolutely, take your own jungle. Victor is very good at clearing center sacrifices, because while they do lots of damage, he can heal it. When you know you're weak, prioritize your own jungle. When you know you're strong, get in the enemy's jungle. If not, you are wasting your power. Victor's ultimate is not just a get-out-of-jail-free card to be used defensively. It can also be used very proactively to make certain plays happen that other characters couldn't make without having a second life. Here we see me defending the blue Guardian, the most important Guardian, against 4 attackers. By the 11-minute mark, the Guardians are very easily diveable by just 2, maybe 3 players. 4 players is overwhelming, but here I'm able to use the safety of my ultimate to bomb the entire wave with my Aura of Suffering, forcing the enemies off the tower, because for them to stay and defeat the tower, they would get stunned by my ultimate and would be traded. Another usage for Victor's ultimate is its ability to essentially cleanse Curse's effect. Most characters in the game in the situation you're seeing now, upon being cursed so late into the game, no matter how strong they were, would just die. However, because Victor can respawn and effectively cleanse all CC applied to him, Victor can weather situations that would otherwise be certain death, such as being cursed in the middle of 4 people, and use that to continue fighting after while Curse is on cooldown. By being able to fight through Curse's effect here, I'm able to use this otherwise extremely aggressive dive to equalize a fight where we were down 30k souls and 3 rejuves. For our next segment, let's look at the tactical death.
Yep.
We have Victor ult, that's our best hope.
I'm gonna hit the tactical death. They're gonna kill me, they're gonna kill me, they're gonna kill me.
Wait a minute. Go back.
Hold up.
Oh, wait a second. Tactical death.
The tactical death.
Victor has 2 different options to consider when fighting for mid-boss. He can take the traditional approach of just using massive AoE damage to fight the enemies normally, but don't underestimate his ability to tactically die in order to use the stun of his ultimate to secure the rejuve and fight afterwards, as you see in this clip. Fight positioning. In this clip, you're going to see me take a defensive stance. The enemy's engaged on us, and we weren't entirely grouped together. Instead of charging forward, I retreat back towards my teammate's side of the map. You're going to see me look to play around my Kelvin. Instead of taking a very aggressive stance chasing down the enemies, I intentionally play around the inside space, next to my Kelvin. This lets me leverage the healing from Kelvin's ultimate to generate more pain batteries and very aggressively use my 3. While it wasn't necessary in that fight, it can be necessary in other fights. As for target priority, Victor excels at 2 things: chasing down and punishing bad positioning from low mobility targets, such as the page you see caught out of position here, as well as countering and harassing enemy carries. Victor likes to fight characters that have cleansable on-hit status effects. Characters that build things like Toxic Bullets, Heal Bane, characters that have on-hits like Infernus Burn, Mirage Jin's Mark, 7 Static Charge. All of these things Victor directly counters. As the Victor player, you need to take note each game of the characters on the enemy team that you are best able to counter the abilities of, and preferentially run them down in fights when possible. You are the front line as Victor, but that doesn't mean you're required to stand right next to your teammates. Because of Victor's high movement speed, the on-hit slow effect from Aura of Suffering, and his ability to cleanse CC that locks him down, Victor is very capable at charging ahead of his team to create space and run down enemy carries, forcing them out of position. In this next clip, we see Wraith show up on the green wave we have shoved out. We use this opportunity to try to take a quick 65 engagement. Something to note, however, Wraith is not one of the characters I just described that Victor is good at fighting. She doesn't usually have on-hit effects to cleanse, like Toxic Bullets, and instead just has upfront raw damage. Because of this, instead of opting to fight her myself when the Wraith shows up, I run away, opting to let my Haze take care of it. Soon after, though, the Mirage, the other carry on their team, shows himself, and I take the opportunity to aggressively charge after him.
They have no carries.
This wasn't accidental. I knew I could take the Mirage in a fight, but I also knew I couldn't take the Wraith in a fight. Calculating these matchups before teamfighting is crucial to making good decisions on Victor. A note about Victor's third ability, Aura of Suffering. This ability ramps up its damage over time over the course of 10 seconds. It does 4 times the damage at the end of the cast compared to at the start. What this means is it's essential in the late game teamfights when Victor is wanting to do damage to multiple targets that you cast Aura of Suffering before fights begin, so that when you jump in the middle of 3 people, you're not doing 130 damage per second, you're doing 280. In the early game, when you're only using Aura of Suffering on one person at a time, it doesn't matter, because it's just the more damage you do to your enemy, the more you do to yourself. But in the end game, when you're hitting multiple targets, you are doing much more damage than you are receiving for casting the ability. So it's important that you do more damage, because it just means you're going to heal more. According to StatLocker GG, these are the items with the highest win rate on Victor. Most of these are endgame items because people who reach the endgame on Victor are more likely to win than not. However, Infuser's at the bottom of this list. I suspect this is almost entirely due to the fact that people use Infuser before fully channeling their Aura of Suffering before fights begin. If you are using Infuser before actually channeling your Aura of Suffering to completion, you are losing 2 to 3 times the spirit damage you could be doing to people in an AoE. That has enormous effects for an item like Infuser that's making you heal for all of your spirit damage. You're losing hundreds of potential HP of healing per fight if you are using Infuser at the beginning as opposed to when you've charged your Aura. Diving to this fight with my Aura fully charged, ready to fully leverage my Infuser, I practically solo wipe their entire team, winning the game. For the clearest example of this, watch this clip. And remember, if you're enjoying this video, consider booking a private coaching session. Standard sessions include a profile review, in-depth VOD analysis of your choosing, and an open Q&A for any topics you might be interested in at the end. The link is in the description below. Moving on now to the build. This should not look too unfamiliar to anyone that's been following Victor builds recently. This character was mostly solved by Lomane and Listic together several months ago. However, there are some adjustments for the new patch and the new 4.8k breakpoint spikes. As for early items, I think in most cases you are saving for hitting Torment Pulse. You want to hit Torment Pulse as fast as possible to be the thing that gets you to the full 0.8k spike. It's an enormous jump in spirit for Victor, even still after the slight nerf to it. And the fact of the matter is, it's not just giving him damage on his pain battery, but it's giving him a tremendous amount of sustain with Jumpstart. Raw Spirit is Victor's best stat, particularly in the early game. Everyone is running some combination of opening 800s, either just rushing Improved Spirit through Extra Improved, or going Extra Spirit and Extra Charge. Technically, Improved Spirit gives you more damage, since it's also giving you more damage on your pain battery, but buying Extra Charge gives you practically the same amount of healing, but just buying Extra Charge grants you an additional cast of Jumpstart. So if you're low on HP for whatever reason, certainly go Extra Charge, as this like in lieu of just defaulting to a healing item. In most cases, when lane is close, and it will often be close if you're fighting people of similar elo, or you don't have a hard winning matchup through your teammate, it's going to be pretty standard to buy an extra supplementary item like monster rounds or extra regen just to get you through saving for a whole 3,200 souls. You're very weak when saving this many souls, and you need to play like that's the case. Track the items that your opponents are buying. If you're sitting on 2,500 souls and it's the 6-minute mark and your opponents have spent all of their souls, do not be getting aggressive. You need to acknowledge that they're stronger than you and not fight them on even terms. After this, you have some options. Right now, most victors go straight into the green items. While that is, I think, perfectly reasonable, especially with the early game buff to rushing vitality, I don't think Victor necessarily requires it, because most of Victor's effective HP comes not from his raw max health, but comes from his constant healing. And so rushing spirit items actually is making him significantly tankier, because you're rarely running around the jungle on Victor with absolutely full HP. You're typically using Jumpstart off of cooldown to regenerate HP you're missing from farming the jungle and catching waves intermittently. And so doing things to improve your jumpstart's healing and increase your camp clear speed, which these greens don't do, actually helps Victor significantly to maintain high HP while increasing his damage output. Some of the nerfs they've taken off of the 4.8k spike have now essentially buffed 7.2k spike. And so right now still, it's not just the 4.8k breakpoint that's very efficient for Victor, but also hitting 7.2, as that's a 14 spirit increase just for 2400 souls. So what I like to do after Torment Pulse is go straight into Improved Spirit and compress cooldown on the jumpstart. This is giving me lots of healing, it's giving me tremendous damage on my Pain Battery and my Aura of Suffering. This makes you a very big threat for the fights that you actually take in this early stage. As for the green items themselves, Enduring Speed, actually especially after the global MS nerfs, is core item on Victor still. What's really been nerfed is stacking multiple sources of move speed on a single character. Victor doesn't really do that. This is just his one general move speed item. He's not firing his gun, so he's not having the movement speed penalty from that. He's just running around and trying to track people with his 3. This is perfect for him. Healing Booster, though. I don't like rushing the full upgrade to this Healing Booster early. That is because when you buy this item in lane, since it doesn't increase your healing from the heal minions, it really is just marginally improving the heal on your jumpstart. And for most of lane phase, it works out to about 1, towards the very, very end, once you've got your spirit items, about 2 extra health regen per second, assuming you're using jumpstart roughly off of cooldown, which you should be doing in most cases. And so if people sometimes don't spend 800 souls on extra regen because they don't think it's worth it, well then in far fewer cases it's going to be worth it to spend another 800 souls on heal booster for 1 to 2 health regen per second. This is only really good once you have all of your spirit online and extra spirit from boons from gaining more souls, so that it improves your jumpstart's healing more. But really, this item is truly effective only once your Pain Battery is maxed, as it's improving the missing health HP you get from casting Pain Battery on champions. So it's very important to get this item once Pain Battery is maxed, but in most cases I would not suggest rushing this item in lane. I think it's very ineffective. It's a very inefficient usage of your souls. And Spirit Lifesteal. Right now, some people are experimenting with something they've done in the past, which is running barriers instead of Spirit Lifesteal. My thought process for this is whether or not barriers are overpowered in a particular patch. Just because of Victor's hero design, he generally is going to prefer to run items that increase his effective health pool through healing, as opposed to just making it harder for him to take damage. Why? Well, he charges his Pain Battery by actually taking a percentage of his max HP and damage, which means increasing your max health makes it harder to gain Pain Batteries, and making it harder to take damage by getting armor also makes it harder for him to charge Pain Batteries. The barriers themselves, when you take damage through a barrier on Victor, it doesn't actually count as damage to his max health, and so he doesn't charge Pain Battery. So anything you're doing to make yourself tankier, especially like through barriers that isn't healing, is making it harder for Victor to charge Pain Batteries. What's most efficient on him is to increase his effective HP by having more sources of regeneration, so that it's easier for him to lose HP to charge his Pain Batteries, while still actually being tanky, because he's regenerating that HP. So in most cases, it's going to be correct to default to Spirit Lifesteal in Victor. I think going things like barriers on him will be particularly effective when these items are overpowered, or if other system changes are made. But as it stands, in most cases, Spirit Lifesteal is better, just as from the character design standpoint. Furthermore, though, this is setting up for your Infuser purchase, which really is one of Victor's probably 3 strongest items and 2 strongest 6Ks. So if you are buying an item like Spirit Shielding or Reactive Barrier, which situationally can be good, and in early fights can be better than Spirit Lifesteal, certainly, it's actually hurting your endgame in many instances. So be careful making that trade-off. I wouldn't spend more than these, because this is your 4.8k breakpoint, and you do want to get onto more important items on Victor. So if you are going to go for a barrier, I would suggest dropping the Spirit Lifesteal for the barrier. Pick this item up later if you do that. The upgrade to cooldown, I think upgrading Victor's cooldown makes the most sense. Out of all of the purples he'd be wanting to get next, I think this is best for him. because at this point it's giving you more jump starts, or not more jump starts, you're starting the jump start max now with your compressed cooldown, but now your pain battery is maxed, and it's giving you easier to charge pain batteries because cooldown does increase pain battery generation when you take damage, but it's also reducing your ultimate CD. And on Victor, you really should be thinking of your ultimate more as a playmaking tool, not just some second chance in case you get ganked, though of course it does do that. When you have your ultimate on Victor, you have many more options. You're able to skirmish into enemy jungle much more confidently. You can take the risk, perhaps, in some situations to push a wave that maybe if you didn't have your ult would be too risky. It allows you to, it's much harder for you to die in your own jungle and drop your bag if a smart enemy ganks you. You just have many, many more options and much more safety on Victor when you have your ultimate up. And so getting cooldown on this thing very quickly means a lot. However, the mid-core on Victor, most of these items, the order in which you buy them at least, is very situational, game over game. I think that's always going to be the case on Victor. Rapid recharge, though late game you're always going to want this item, it's only really good to rush when you particularly have dots to cleanse. Greater expansion, the range is fantastic on Victor for getting you effectiveness on your Aura of Suffering. As you're transitioning into more of a team fight period of the game, you're wanting to hit multiple targets with Aura, and you're also wanting to hit faraway targets with Pain Battery to make sure you can always get heals off. So this is great, but it also gives you Spirit Resist, so it's much more effective to buy this item when you are playing into increasing Spirit Resist, so you want to keep track of what your opponents are actually buying. Warpstone, this is really Victor's default bullet resist item. The movement is very useful, but the teleport alone is not worth 3,200 souls. It's just not. And so you don't want to default this item until there are particular skills on the enemy team you're wanting to dodge, as it gets more important with respawns increasing as you get into the late game, or certain people on the enemy team start to scale up their bullet damage and you need some bullet resist. For Mystic Vulnerability, this item is an incredible DPS increase on Victor, while also making him tankier. And something to note is that this is the best kind of damage increase on Victor because it doesn't make him hurt himself more. See, the thing with Aura of Suffering is it's always damaging you for 70% of the tooltip. It can't be mitigated with armor, which means making yourself tankier through armor doesn't actually help you with Aura of Suffering. But also, increasing your outgoing spirit damage, though it can maybe increase the lifesteal you're getting, still does just scale up the raw damage you're dealing to yourself. However, Mystic Vuln, and by extension Escalating Exposure, don't do that, because instead of making you do more outgoing damage, it's actually just making your enemies receive more damage. And so you can keep your self-damage staying the same, while your enemies actually take more damage. So by this point in the game, since you no longer necessarily need the flat spirit like you do in the lane phase to generate more health with Jumpstart, it's appropriate oftentimes to sell your improved spirit to pick up Mystic Vuln. Because the Spirit Resist starts to scale better into the late game while you have a higher health pool. It also just gives you basically a flat 8% damage increase, which is fantastic. For the major 6k Powerspikes, it's Infuser and Escalating Exposure. Into high spirit damage, or maybe particularly tanky targets, maybe like a Moen Krill that's burrowed, you can go Escalating Exposure first. Targets where it's actually realistic that you're going to charge up all of these stacks on a target to finish them off. However, I believe in most cases it is actually better to go Infuser first. Escalating Exposure really just is paying 4,800 souls for that extra damaging passive. It keeps the 8% spirit resist on spirit damage, the same for Mystic Foam. So the 4.8k you're spending really just is on that extra passive. And that passive, by the way, is not affected at all by trans CD. And it gives you a marginal spirit resist improvement. Whereas Infuser is giving you potentially a 1,000 HP or more heal boost when you're jumping into team fights. And both of these are your major late game team fighting 6Ks. I think Infuser doesn't feel good to some people because they don't use it correctly. I discussed this earlier in the video. If you're using this item specifically when you've actually charged up your Aura of Suffering for at least 5 seconds, when this thing is actually doing triple, sometimes quadruple damage if you've charged it for 10 seconds, the effectiveness of the Infuser is just exponentially increased. If you pop Infuser haphazardly when you jump into a fight and you're doing like 60-70 damage per second with the items you have at that point per target, yeah, it's not making you heal that much per second. But if you're doing 250 HP per target and you jump into 3 people, Victor is going to instantly heal 1000 HP, and that is absolutely fight-changing, and is part of what can make Victor feel invincible sometimes, but sometimes just fall over and die. It's a good infuser usage. So if you use this item very intentionally, I think in most cases in the early game, it's going to get you more effectiveness than just rushing the raw damage of escalating exposure. That said, you do certainly go this item, for the same reasons that I said you go Mystic Vuln. It's not increasing your outgoing damage, i.e. damage that's hurting you. It's mainly increasing the damage your enemies receive. So you're doing more damage without actually hurting yourself much more, which is always good. And then to cap out the core items, you have many item cooldowns. So being able to cycle your Infuser, Warp Stone, also increase the damage of your Torment Pulse is fantastic. Looking at the flex items on Victor, I had them divided into two categories. For early monster rounds, it is sometimes very appropriate to buy this item in lane. It is not just a defensive item to just keep waves out of your face, but also offensive, in that if you're able to decisively clear the waves faster, you can take trades with your opponent that are more favorable for yourself. But it's also very defensive, of course, because if you're able to keep the wave out of your face, you're not just denying your opponents the ability to siege your Guardian, but you're also denying them potential poke on you. Because on any character in the game, it's taking time to peek out from their cover to shoot a minion that's dying. That's time that the enemies, if they want, can shoot you in the face. So using monster rounds lets you significantly cut down the time that you have to stick your head out to clear a wave. So it's very good offensively and defensively. The barriers, while right now I think they're generally suboptimal on Victor, they are still reasonable, usable, especially if you, for whatever reason, are anticipating a high chaos, like lots of combat game, or maybe you're doing much more skirmishing in the enemy jungle around towers than you are like hard farming the jungle, then these shields become much more effective. For Suppressor, this item, I believe, can be rushed as early as item 1 when you're laning against high gun damage. I would not count Mirage, because his damage is just applying Jinx Mark, and Suppressor is not going to help you there. This item does not give as much spirit power as basically any other set of 800s does on Victor, and so it does not give you as much sustain or poke, but it scales tremendously well from the mid-game onward, as it's not just a fantastic combat item for fighting heroes with gun damage, but it also just reduces the outgoing damage of all jungle camps, since the Suppressor effect applies to their fire rate as well. So this helps you clear safer, but also fight better in team fights. And if you're against 2 gun characters in lane, of course it can be good as early as item 1. For late flex, E-Shift, significantly nerfed with the cooldown being practically doubled, though, in theory, this is still a fantastic item on Victor. Though instead of just defaulting it to just live in fights for free while using Aura of Suffering, now this item is much more situational in that you would be buying it to counter particular ultimates. This is a great purchase when fighting against lots of AoE ultimates that are giving you trouble. Maybe the enemy team has Lash, Infernus, Wraith, and a Pocket, things like that, where there's lots of AoE stuns and silences, or of course Pocket's Affliction that you really, really do not want to have to deal with on Victor. When all of those things are present in the game, this item becomes much better. For all the reasons it was good before, it's still good now, just that since before you could get this item guaranteed twice per fight with Transcendent cooldown, now it's much more realistic that you only get this item off once per fight, and so, of course, it's going to be much worse, and not the item you default to anymore, though it is absolutely still purchasable in most games. I mentioned Pocket. Another item to more cheaply deal with Pocket is Counterspell, if you are paying attention to it. Again, the hardest counter to Victor in the game certainly is Pocket's Affliction. Dodging that, however you are able to, like through an item most likely, such as E-Shift or Counterspell, dodging it can be absolutely game-changing. Healbane is great on Victor. It's probably his best, most realistically applicable anti-heal, though because Victor wants to, as soon as possible, hit very particular item Powerspikes that let him decisively carry things like mid-boss fights, he does not want to default to being the anti-healer on the team. You want your other characters on the team going for anti-heal. Only buy Healbane when you're entering the mid to late game, 20 minutes plus, and you're looking at your teammates and realizing your teammates have not bought enough healing items. Buy Healbane only when you have to. You don't want to default this item on Victor, even though he's very good at applying it. Return Fire. This is a very good item late game on Victor. It's not really a defensive item. I see this as more of it's a hybrid item, because I think it does a significant amount of damage when you're using it intentionally when fighting enemy gun carries. It's very common in every game of Deadlock, at least in high elo, that when you're entering the late game, there is a gun-focused character on the enemy team who probably has most of the souls. That character in most instances is very effective at fighting Victor. Victor, though, wants to fight them, especially if he's able to get on top of them and start really melting them with an item like Escalating Exposure, sticking to them with Warpstone. Victor actually is pretty good at dealing with enemy hyper carries. Buying an item like Return Fire when you're fighting a very skilled enemy or scaled enemy like a Wraith could do an absurd amount of damage. If you pop Return Fire when a Wraith uses full auto and starts to gun you down, Wraith will literally do 1,000 damage to herself through Return Fire. This item is probably underrated on Victor as a late game slot filler. You would not want to sell another item to fit in Return Fire, only when you're late game and you have Victor's core items where you have a little bit of extra room. See, even this with having Improved Spirit, there's still an extra slot. So maybe you have something like maybe realistically you have Suppressor still, but you get rid of Improved Spirit by this point in the game, and that's what you would replace this with some kind of extra item, either a Capstone, but that would be the moment you're buying something like Return Fire, just for the last fight, so that you have extra something to deal with their gun carry. For the same reason though, if you have a open flex slot and you just want to spend some money so that you're as strong as possible before the decisive end game fight, go Rebuttal. Rebuttal's damage bonus applies to everything. So if you parry a Moe and Krill randomly, suddenly you just do 30% more damage total to everything and everyone. This item can be absurd when you're doing something particularly like fighting the mid-boss pit. Imagine you jump into the mid-boss pit after channeling your Aura of Suffering for 10 seconds, you Warpstone and pop Infuser, you parry a single guy in the rejuve. Even if you don't secure it yourself, you are now doing something like 500 damage per second per target that's scaling with Escalating and you're healing with Infuser. You actually become the server admin for several seconds. This item is late game. There's a real sense in which Rebuttal is a better late game item than it is an early game item, even though it's 800 souls. Don't underestimate it. For the Capstones, most games you're just buying Juggernaut because the enemies have gun carries and someone on your team hasn't bought this item yet. Though if someone has, you can consider Plated Armor. This item is too good. You always want someone on your team with this item. It's very similar to Heroic Aura in that way. It's just too soul efficient. But if someone already has it, you don't need to. It's not a stacking effect. So be selfish and go Plated Armor. It will make you very strong. If you're playing Victor, that's probably best for your team anyway. Spellbreaker is sort of your spirit-oriented defensive item. You can go Frenzy. It's going to get you it's going to get you the 4.8 kick gun breakpoint on its own. It's after Frenzy that perhaps if you're in the super late game, you can consider maybe doing something like Berserker to get more gun damage, though in most cases, I don't think this is optimal. If there are not any major considerations that make you want to buy some kind of particular situational item, like E-Shift to dodge an ult, Counterspell to dodge an ult, Juggernaut or Plated to shut down a gun carry, if there's nothing that's screaming at you where I need to buy a counter item right now, well then go Boundless. That's going to finish off your build, getting you maximum spirit investment, which of course is going to be most efficient for the 15% spirit power buff on Boundless. It's an incredible damage increase. It's going to make your Aura of Suffering do something with max boons of close to 400 damage per second, I want to say. Of course, being scaled aggressively with EE. It's very good to buy on Victor, but only as a last item. As for these two items, these are sort of controversial in that I see many Victor builds, particularly low elo Victor builds, really like healing tempo. I want to say, for the reasons I'm explaining in the annotations here, I think this item is awful on Victor. The stats of this item are strong only when you're applying it to your teammates. If you're playing something like McGinnis or Dynamo, 40% fire rate and 1.2 MS is good, but that's less of an effect than Heroic Aura is. At least slightly less move speed. I think it's a little bit more fire rate. But for 4,800 souls, the healing effectiveness increase is very small. It's 5%, because Healing Booster is already 20% of it. It's also giving you 10% spirit resist. It's not very helpful, and by the late game, by the time you ever be buying this item, the health regen is literally meaningless. You are basically spending 4,800 souls to get a marginal fire rate increase and 5% extra healing. If this were an item on its own that just said that, it was a 4800 green that gave you 5% heal effectiveness and 40% fire rate, I would like to think almost no one would buy it, because that is terrible. Especially if you're building Spirit Victor. And if you want to win, you should be going Spirit Victor. Gun can be fun, Spirit is much better at every stage of the game in practically every circumstance. This item is terrible, even when you're going Gun Victor. You should never buy this item. I won't even qualify that statement. It is a terrible item. Cultist Sacrifice is different. This is not a do not buy under any circumstance item. I just want to make the case that I believe, at least in its current state, this is not really generally ever better than just going Greater Expansion. Which, if you look at Victor builds, the ones that do go Cult Sacrifice don't go Greater Expansion. I have yet to see an E6 build that builds them both. It seems to be understood that Cultist Sacrifice is basically the range item substitute for Greater Expansion. Here's the thing. People will sometimes argue it's good because it gives you extra jungle clear. I want to say I think that's fake, because 25% of the jungle clear it's giving you is already from monster rounds, which is 800 souls. So I want to look at this item through the perspective really of the passive it's giving you, because that's what you're spending 2400 souls on. Monster rounds is a great item. It's unrelated to Cult Sacrifice. Think of Cultist Sacrifice, as a 2400 item. What's it giving you? Well, it's giving you somewhere around 20 to 40% gun damage, which outside the laning phase on Victor in most cases is practically meaningless. It's giving you somewhere around 150 to 300 bonus HP, you know, from the point of the game you'd be buying it to later, which, while useful, again, is actually not as much as it may seem, because whatever Victor's health pool is, whatever his max HP is, that is actually just a fraction of what his effective health is, because most of Victor's survivability comes from regen. It comes from healing with Jumpstart. It comes from healing with Pain Battery. It comes from Lifesteal. If Victor's max HP goes up 150, even if his max HP is 2k, that's not a 10% survivability increase. It's like a 4% survivability increase, because really Victor has thousands more real HP in the form of healing per fight. And then ability range, it's 15%. That is much less than the 35% of Greater Expansion, and it matters a lot, especially because it's radius. It's a considerably smaller ability range increase. And so if people are agreeing that range is a very good item on Victor, and Cult Sacrifice is basically a kind of range item for Victor, well, it's a pretty terrible range item. Lastly, the soul generation. Victor is a character that wants to get lots of souls, and Cultist Sacrifice does let you do that. However, the problem is the rest of the stats that the item's giving you really aren't worth it. And so what good is it that this item over the course of 20 minutes is maybe going to generate you 2,000 souls if those 2,000 souls are essentially just paying for the bad item in the first place? Really, the weapon damage is practically useless on Victor outside of the laning phase. You don't want to buy this item in lane phase. The HP, while nice, is not worth really any percentage of 2,400 souls. And not to mention, even though the range is fine, the whole active item is not even active always. See, if you drop Trans CD, which you don't get till much later, the item only has like 60% uptime, 66% uptime, something like that. And that's if you're using it off of CD. So even the range it's giving you is not permanent, and the other stats it's giving you that are bad to begin with aren't permanent either. I think this item gives you a lot of stats that maybe look good on paper, but in practice are not useful. And the soul generation the item has only is really, in most games, being directed towards paying off the dead item in the first place. I think this item is fake on Victor. If it gets buffed, surely it will be, it can be good. It can be buffed in several ways and be fine on Victor. But in its current state, where it's a relatively balanced item as is, it's the stats that it gives you are not useful enough on Victor to make this an optimal Victor item. Especially because it's giving you gun investment, when Victor doesn't really want gun investment. It's distracting you from spirit investment, which is much better, and it's not even getting you to the 4.8k buff, unless you do something stupid like buy Fleetfoot. But you don't want to buy Fleetfoot on Victor, you want Enduring Speed, because it's a much better item in general. So for those reasons, I think Cultist Sacrifice is a bait item, and you should not be buying it this patch on Victor. If you're going Spirit Victor. If you're going Gun Victor, I think this is much more appropriate, since you can weaponize the gun damage and the bonus health too, frankly, a bit better. If you liked this video, consider subscribing. More and better content is on the way in the near future. If you really enjoyed this video and want to improve as fast as possible, consider booking a private coaching session through the link in the description below.